You start. Just so you guys know, I did not grade homework from last week because the service denial attack killed my connection to Moodle. Did anybody else have problems with that yesterday? No, yeah, we were trying to do it. Yeah. So anyway, there was a huge denial of service attack yesterday throughout most of the United States, Europe, and they shut down They shut down Amazon. They shut down Twitter. They shut down Pinterest. They shut down Moodle. They shut down. It was dependent on where your server was being hosted, whether you got affected or not. But I couldn't get on, so there was no way for me to grade. So I didn't grade. So I'm usually pretty good about staying on top of that. So you'll probably see stuff show up. It's the pen tool stuff that I think is the assignment that I have yet to grade. So there was some conversation about the assignment that was due for today. So I just need to look and see what it was we were actually talking about, and maybe we'll actually just go ahead and do it today. So we did most of Sunny last week. All you really needed to complete was the hair. So I don't know how you went about doing it, but I can say that probably the easiest way to have done it, I'm just going to create a brand new file in here and just say OK to that. And I'm just going to do a quick series of selections in here just so you can sort of see what's going on. I'm just going to do a series of selections and save them. So I'm just going to do this, and I'm going to save it, and I'm going to call it shape 1 and say OK. I'm going to do another one here and save this guy and call that shape 2. Okay. And say OK. And then finally, I'll do one over here and call this shape 3. And deselect. So there's a number. So you can see that I've got shape 1 here, shape 2 here. So let's just imagine this was the background, this was the sweater, and this was the skin, just to give you some idea how that whole part is. I'm going to choke this up a little bit so I can get to a new one. You can actually create simply a blank alpha channel by clicking on this guy right here. It's just like adding a blank layer in the layers panel, but it's in the channels. And it opens up, and it's actually a blank one right here. And then you could have done this one by one. We could have loaded this selection right here. But then it gets difficult. If we try to load this selection right here next to it, that part doesn't actually work for us. So instead, what you can do is you could come up to the select menu, come down to load selection, and again, we would pick shape number 1 and say, and our checkbox just says new selection. And I would just go, OK. Then right back up to the select menu again, down to load selection again. And now you could actually pick shape 2. But instead of making it a new selection, we're actually going to add it to the current one that's already going. So when you click on that, you now have both of them are loaded. And then finally, we're going to do the same thing again, up to the select menu, down to load selection. And we're going to load shape 3. Sorry. And again, we are going to add this to the current selection. And this would have been the 3 of those things together. And then in your alpha channel right now, you could simply fill these guys with white. Command D to deselect, and then simply invert the selection. And this becomes what these aren't. So all 4 of these together will make up the entire image. Does that make sense? Are there questions about this? So the whole trick was you had everything but the hair, so you simply subtracted everything from a blank channel. You could have started with one of these channels and simply, we could have gotten there as well. You could have loaded this selection, filled this guy with white. You know, we could have, there are other ways that you can do this exact same thing. It's just that, anyway, you guys know where I'm going. So I'm not going to save that. So I'm going to look what else was, okay, so the next one out was how to actually the different ways of knocking this girl out. So that is what we will do right now. And since you haven't turned it in, I would strongly suggest you doing this with me right now, and then you can save this as your assignment, and you'll be good to go. Do you love the fact that I do all the homework with you guys in class? Not all of it, but some of it. What a guy, right? So if you've already done this, you don't need to do it again if you're feeling good about it, but we will sort of go through the steps because part of this I do want to sort of get a recap on. So I'm going to find the file. It's a TIFF file that is in week 6, last week of our class files. I really got to change this behavior on my computer. All right, so here, you guys should know this. When I double click on a TIFF file, it opens up in preview because preview is the program designated to actually open TIFFs for me on my computer. If you want to change that, just select the copy of the file, come up to the file menu down to Get Info, and at the bottom of Get Info down here, it's going to say, what do you want to open it with? It's this little drop down open with part right here. The default right now is preview, but you can change this to anything. So I'm going to change mine to Photoshop CC 0.5. But then if you just do that and close this up, then this file alone, this TIFF alone, will open up into Photoshop when you double click on it. If you want all of your TIFFs to open up in Photoshop, you click this button right down here that says Change All. And if you do that, you'll get this warning saying, are you sure you want to do this? And I'm going to say yes. And now when I double click on this file, it should go into Photoshop. Okay, so the trick to doing this is I wanted you guys to sort of explore several different ways of separating this girl from the green background. So the first way we will actually look at it is the oldest of the methods that we had talked about, and it's simply finding the channel that's got the greatest amount of contrast between her hair and the background. So if we click on the red channel, that is no help to us at all. There's no separation at all. The green channel helps us out somewhat, and the blue channel is also bad. So the green channel is the one to do. So you grab the green channel. We are going to make a copy of it, and I'm going to rename the, yeah, maybe we should call this still, we'll leave it as green channel, green copy knockout. Because I wanted to be able to look at your channels to see the various different ways that you actually did do the knockout work. And then typically we would do exactly what we've always done. I'm going to zoom into some level, some area that's up here to try to find an area of her hair that I know should certainly be dark, and so I can drop a sample point so I know how hard to drive the level that I'm going to put on here to try to build the contrast between the two. So I'm going to grab my color sampler tool. I'm going to hover. I'm looking around in this area up in here. This area right in here, if you look up at my screen up here, this is confusing to me. I know there's transparency in here, so I'm going to avoid that. I would feel kind of good about this place right here. I feel kind of good about this place. Areas like this stuff out here make me really nervous. This kind of stuff I would avoid. I don't see anything down here that I just feel like there's too much transparency in these areas, and that what that'll cause me to do is drive my curve or my levels a little too hard. So I'm actually going to go after this spot right in here. You'll see there's sort of a double swoosh of hair. Right in here, there's a little bit darker area. I'm going to pick a spot right in there. And I ended up with, when I changed my color readout on my first point to RGB, I ended up with 77s in there. And then I'm going to click a spot that's out here on the background to get my second point. And again, I'm going to change my second readout to RGB again, and I get 157. So I've got about 80 tones of separation between those two. That should make for a reasonable mask, or the beginning of a mask. So our next move would be to hit Command L, but I want to show you guys another way of actually doing this, or another way to think about doing this. Command L brings up the levels dialog box, and what that really lets us do is, again, we can actually take, we should talk about this a little bit more, just so that I'm going to move this a little bit to the side. When you start to drag up the black point here, again, I'm only looking at my screen, and again, I'm going to get close to that 0 point on my number 1 point. So I'm looking at this part of my screen right here. I get to about an 8, then I actually go to my arrow keys and a couple more up. And so my input ended up being 58 to get to my black point. And the white point comes back, and I get to 254, go back to my arrow keys. And recheck your first point to make sure you're still okay. So then you have some idea of what's really going on here, and you can begin to take a look at this. Again, I don't care about this part of her skin here. I care about this part. I'm looking just to get the separation of the edge between her hair and the rest of this stuff over here. So again, I use my preview button to go on and off to see how I'm feeling about the edge quality in here. And I'm feeling pretty good about the edge quality, but one thing we haven't talked about now is another possible change that we can do in this. And it's this middle slider right here. You can use this middle slider to actually affect the edge quality slightly. So you'll see as I start to push this thing slightly up, I'm getting a little bit darker on this real feathery hair right here. I'm getting it to go slightly darker. Again, you don't want to be too aggressive about this part. Like you can see as I start to crank it up even harder, I'm going to start, I think, getting nervous about what's really going on. I feel like this edge is beginning to fall apart here a little bit. But again, I'm going to use my preview button on and off. Yeah, and I'm just feeling like this is blocking up way too much down in here, that this additional move here has just been a little bit too aggressive. So I'm going to back this guy off a little bit. Again, use my preview on and off. I'm sort of okay with that guy. And so that would be what I would do right now, although don't hit OK yet, because we're going to look at this doing a different thing. I'm going to hit cancel out of here, and I'm going to do a different one. And the one I'm going to do now, again, if you can't remember the keyboard shortcut, it's the same place that levels is. It's right next to it. It's the image menu down to adjustments, and we're going to do curves instead of levels. So the command keyboard shortcut for that is Command M, or it's, again, like I said, simply go up there to the top. And with Command M, you actually can do those same sorts of tricks, but you have a little bit more leeway in terms of what you can do, because you can actually then bend this curve in different ways. But to do the same thing that we've done with levels, it starts out exactly the same way. You grab the black point slider here at the bottom. I'm still watching this number 1 point over here that's 77s, and I'm simply going to drag this bottom one guy up until, again, I get to close to 0, and then I'm going to go to my arrow keys until I get zeroed out. And I ended up with the same 58 input, which is a good thing. That would make sense. I'm going to grab you could grab the white point and simply drag it, or you can grab the little guy at the bottom, the little triangle at the bottom. It'll do the same thing, and start to crank that back again until you get close to that 256. Listen to me, oh God. Let's say more like 254, that works. And then again, I'm going to go after my arrow keys. Now, and it gets 255. But now what I was talking about, let me get this guy out of the way just a little bit. Again, in terms of the edge quality, the transition that we've got here, right now that black is going to stay black and this white's going to stay black. But all the tones that are in between, we can actually push those around by simply dropping a point on this curve and pushing it in or out and changing sort of the shape of that. And you can see as I start to pull that curve down slightly, it starts to make it's not changing the white point or the black point. Those stay where they are, but it is changing the sort of feathery part that's happening in the middle. And again, I'm going to use my preview on and off to see how I feel about that. This may end up being too aggressive, guys. We're just going to have to see. The only way to see is to actually go ahead and build the mask and put it on to see if this worked or not. So I'm going to say OK to this. So same kind of move, just a different way of doing it. I'm going to double click on the hand, and you can see that what we've actually, the beginnings of what we have going on here. To go ahead and finish this thing out, typically what I think I would do at this point, well, let's go ahead and finish it out really quick. I'm going to zoom into this lower shoulder over here. I've got a really bad thing that's going on this edge of this girl's skin right here. I can see that that's not very good. I've got a whole nother issue that's going on here. I'm actually going to try to hit this with an overlay brush. So hit the B key to get a brush. I'm going to change the brush to sort of the medium hardness, which is where I'm at right now. I'm going to change its blending mode to overlay. 100% opacity, 100% flow. I'm going to make it a much smaller brush. I am going to hit the D key to default my color, foreground and background to black and white. Then I'm going to hit the X key to get black as my foreground color. And the first thing I'm going to do is try to clean up this edge. This may or may not work. If this doesn't work, we'll just go back in here, probably with the pen tool later on, to clean this up. But I'm going to see if I can just come down and just tighten this up a little bit. And I feel like that did a pretty good job there. I'm going to split the difference on this edge of her neck, but I am definitely going to hit this collar because I know that that should actually be dark. I'm going to hit the X key to get white as my foreground color, and I'm going to clean out the rest of this other stuff that's sitting over here. Again, I'm not being too aggressive about this. Don't let this slip over your the line of her neck too much. And again, I'm just repeating I'm just using my mouse and repeatedly tapping here. If there's other stuff out in here that seems like, I don't know if this is junk on my screen or in the image, I'm going to simply go back to normal color and clean out, yeah, that was actually stuff on the image. Clean out the rest of that. I'm going to go on the other side over here. There's not much I can do about this edge of her face. We will deal with that later. There is some hair that's right down here. I mean, we will deal with this later. I'm simply going to check the quality of her hair right here. All of this stuff that's, sorry, I hit the X key to go back to black. All the stuff that is sort of close here, I don't know if this area right here is background or not. I can tell by simply turning on the eyeball, and that eyeball, shit, I can't tell. I'm going to turn on the eyeball of my RGB guy. This is background right here and hair mixed, so you don't want to take that out. So I'm going to leave that, but the rest of this stuff I'm going to go after. This is all background in there. This is probably all background in here, so I'm going to get a little bit of that. I'm going to leave the rest of that as it is. I'm going to do one last check on this RGB guy. This is also background right in here, so I'm going to avoid it. I think that's background there too. The rest of this I'm pretty comfortable about. Again, I'm simply working with a normal brush right now. I get to the end here. I'm going to look on the other side really quick. This would all be background material, so I'm going to leave that all exactly where it is. Those are hair highlights, but the rest of it isn't. And I'm just giving myself some room to use the lasso tool. So then I'm going to zoom back out. And you can go after a really big chunk of her hair right now because I've got a good edge that's going on here. So I'm going to hit the L key to get the lasso tool. And I'm going to start to come up here and around like this. I'm going to stay along the inside of this right here. Come back down, come up. I don't know where this other edge is on this other side over here, so I can't do anything about that guy yet. But I can fill a big chunk of this with black. Command D to deselect. Then I've got to go ahead and build this edge. And to be honest with you, the only way to truly build this edge is with the pen tool. I'm not going to do that right now. You guys know how to do that, right? Or, well, okay, let's just do it. Let's just do it. Let's just do it. Every time I try to shortchange something, it ends up blowing up in my face. Okay, so for me to actually use the pen tool, because her neck goes outside of my image, I am going to go to the pasteboard. That is the F key, which allows me to then start the pen tool, which is the P key outside of my image, so that I can start. I'm really just going to try to get this edge along right here. So I'm going to start outside. I'm going to work my way in to this juncture right here. That is not a right angle where this line actually meets her cheek. That's a small bend in that. So don't just zoom up to it and hit it. You actually want to come here and put a slight bend in that. And then continue up the side of her face. The same thing once you get up here to her ear. That's not a right angle. So when we get close to it, you're going to want to come to the other side and actually do it as a curve. I'm going to sacrifice some of this hair that's actually behind here outside. Again, if I get rid of that hair, you'll never know that it's gone. I'm going to rely on the fact that my mask is still holding some of this feathery stuff out here. But I'm just trying to get up enough to her ear to actually feel like I'm back into safe territory again. So by the time I get around her ear into this area right in here, this now is all a part of my mask already because I've already got the hair selected. So I'm just doing big lines out, just big old chunky lines. It doesn't matter where you put your points right now because you've got the edge that you're actually trying to establish. So then I'm going to go into my path palette, and I'm going to double click on this to name it, and I'm going to call it right face. And say OK. And I'm going to double click the hand so you can get back and you can see what I just did. So all I was really looking for was this edge along the side of her face. My mask has already got all the hair. It's already got this side over here. So the only thing I was really missing was this edge right here. I'm going to load this as a selection. Simply Command click, loads it as a selection. It's too sharp of a selection right now. If we were simply to use this, this thing would look like it's cut out with a razor blade. So I need to soften that edge slightly. To do that, you come up to the Select menu, down to Modify, down to Feather. I'm going to throw in a 1 pixel feather radius on this. It'll just soften the edge just a slight touch. And then I'm going to go back to my green copy knockout, and it's this area right now, and you simply fill it with black as well. Since black is my foreground color, it is Option Delete, Command D to deselect. And this would be the first way of going about actually doing it. So that's number 1. At this stage of the game, I would save your work because it is homework. So that's number 1, first way of doing it. Go back to your RGB channels, and we're going to go after this the second way. In the second method, I think I asked you to do was color range. Yeah, what I was looking for was color range, 0 selective color, and using the channel. So that was the channel one that we just did. That was the first one. The next one that we're going to actually do is come down and we're going to try it with color range. So up to the Select menu, down to color range. The color range dialog box will actually open up. By default, it actually has the first of the eyedroppers picked. If you then come over and you select an area that you can sort of remember being green like this one, it'll actually put a selection in for you. However, with the first tool selected, just like all the selection tools, if I click in another place, it's not going to add that selection to the other place. It'll simply click and it'll select a brand new place. So it'll get rid of the background and it'll pick something else. So for instance, if you click on her skin, you lose the green selection that was in the back and you simply get her skin. I'm going to go back to the selection that was the background, but now instead I want to add to this background selection. I'm going to click on the plus eyedropper right here. In clicking on the plus eyedropper, you can come back into your image and you can click other spots and you'll see that it actually adds more to your selection. An even better method, and I'm going to do it up here in the top corner, is to using this tool is you can click and drag with it. And when you click and drag with it, it will cross all of your, every tone that you go over, it will add that to the selection. Now, I'm not feeling that great about this selection. I'm going to come in there and take a look at it. This doesn't seem to have anywhere near the quality of the one that we were just working on. I don't have any of that feathery hair in here. This seems really pretty chunky to me. However, the fuzziness slider is controlling a lot of what the quality of this edge. So if you take the fuzzy slider and you start to bring it open, you'll actually see that you start to open up some of those areas of fuzzier hair. Now, clearly, you can go too far. If you come all the way up here to 200, I think that would be too far. But you can sort of start to get in an area here where you're starting to regain some of that transparency that's in here. I've picked up a little bit more of her hair in this area right here to see if I can get a little bit better in this part right here. I'm actually going to go to the minus of the eyedroppers. It's the third one over. It's the last of the eyedroppers. If you click on this guy and then come over in this area of her hair that you know is supposed to be solid hair, you can actually click on that and you'll see, and you can actually click and drag. Oh, only one color is selected. Further, try adjusting the fuzziness. All right. Well, there you go. Fuck you. Anyway. So this seems to me to be a little bit better in terms of what I've got going on. Again, I'm going to play with my fuzziness slider a little bit to try to reintroduce a little bit of that feathery edge. So I ended up with a fuzziness of about 162 if you're looking to be closer to me. And I'm going to simply say OK to that. It gives us a selection now. Actually does a pretty good job of getting the stuff around her skin. We'll see what it does on this edge of her face. But again, I'm going to simply come up to the Select menu in order to save this. Up to the Select menu, down to Save Selection, and we'll call this Color Range Knockout. You good over there, guys? No, that's all right. That's all right. So up into color range, select menu, color range. So you've already got a good selection of the background here, but if you click just on the selection, like that, if you click on a plus, then you can actually drag across areas here. You can drag across this whole add more greens that you'll see. So for instance, you're missing this whole corner up here. So you can click on it here and preview as well. Yeah, just click on that area. I'll clean that up a little bit. That part's going pretty well. You can't see what it's actually selecting here. Though, so if you click on this drop down menu, you can go out to your grayscale. Sure. Then this becomes the big view of this. All right. So then, yeah, use the space bar to get the hand in the other direction. So what I'm concerned about is this area up here. This doesn't seem to be good. So if you take the fuzzy slider and start to drag it up, you start to get the quality of this edge back. That's starting to come back a little bit. We're starting to pick up stuff in here that shouldn't be, right? So leave the fuzzy there. Then probably hit this negative and click on this because you're saying you don't want this cone to be in the mount. And that's about as good as this is going to get. So say OK. And then save the selection. So up to the select menu, down to save and save it as color range knockout. Did everybody else get this? We good? Yeah, so yeah. Do the drop down menu here, click down to grayscale, and then you've got the big version of it. So now what do you want to do in this one? Oh, okay. I wouldn't use the fuzziness slider. I would probably, again, if the fuzziness slider is working well for everybody else, I would use an overlay brush to just fix that. So everybody seems to not have this going. Let me show you guys something here really quick. I want you to change. I'm going to go back into color range again. Color range is a sticky dialog box, so it will remember your last setting. But if everybody is actually looking at the image, if you use this drop-down menu right here, if you change it from none to grayscale, your image becomes the big preview of what's going on in this little baby box. So it's just much easier to see. And I can tell I have contamination in my mask right here. I can still see her eyes. I've got contamination in this area up in here. All of that I can fix. So I'm going to hit cancel out of this, and I'm going to go look at the color range mask that I just made. Again, it's at the very bottom of your channels palette. It is an alpha channel. If you click on it, you can see the problem areas that we've actually got. So again, I'm going to do an overlay brush, the B key. I'm going to change it to overlay. I'm going to make it a little bit larger. I haven't changed that 50% softness edge on this guy, and I'm not gonna. And I'm simply going to hit these other areas that I'm feeling pretty certain all of this should be actually black. These areas over here are background. I'm going to leave those guys all alone. I feel like that edge in there is actually pretty good. I can get both of her eyes. And the rest of this actually looks pretty good. I'm just using my hand tool to zoom. Well, that didn't work very well. I used the move tool and actually moved my color range somewhere off. So let me try that one again. All right, and so then this is the second mask that I've actually made. Again, go up and save your work. Yep. Yeah, if you're not sure if you've actually got contamination or not, if you think it's contamination, check up here in your info readout. If you're seeing values, if you're seeing like this, you're getting that like 99 in there, that's actually indicating there's something in there. So if it was solid, you would actually be getting it. So if you can't get it to go ultimately black, you can change it back to normal and make sure that you get black. Try and Command D, make sure you don't have the selection go. So that's the second way of doing it. The third way of doing it, in my opinion, the best way of doing it is our zero selective color. Now, I think we've only done this once in this class, right? Okay, so we're going to do it again right now. We are actually going to make this as an action in addition to doing it. So We're going to come over to the Actions menu. We are going to, it's right next to History. Those two are together. If you go to the flyout menu on the right side of the Actions, we're going to say we actually want to create a new action. That'll actually open up, and we will call this Zero Selective Color. And we're going to say record. And now everything that we do, Photoshop will actually record this into the action. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to come over to the Layers palette and click at the bottom on the Add Adjustment to create a new adjustment layer. And we are going to add a hue and saturation layer to this. We're not going to make any changes in it right now. We're just adding that one. And then we're going to add a second layer to that, another adjustment layer on top of this. So click on this guy and pick Selective Color. And it puts up Selective Color. By default, this always starts in the reds. You do not change any of the ink sets that are in here, any of the cyans, magentas, or yellows. You don't do any changes there. The only thing we ever change is this black ink slider. So again, if you take this all the way to the right, what I've just told Photoshop I want to do is I want you to take anything that is a red in this image and replace it with solid black ink. And then we're going to click on this drop-down menu and come down to the yellows, and we're going to do the exact same thing. We're cranking it all the way, and we're saying anything that's yellow in this image, fill it solid 100% black ink. Then into the greens, we're going to do the exact same thing. Into the cyans, the exact same thing. Into the blues, the same thing. The magentas, the same thing. The whites, the exact same thing. The neutrals, same thing. And finally, the blacks, same thing. Now, if your image does not look solid black like mine does, it's because you have the wrong radio button down here selected. You should have absolute selected. If you don't, you'll have an image that looks like, well, it'll look like this. It looks really solarized. Every time I do this, it screws up my action, but nonetheless, I'll survive. So that is the action that we want to build. So come back over to your Actions palette and click on the little square box down in the lower left-hand corner to stop the recording of that action. To see if the action does work, select both of those layers and simply delete them. And then come back over to your action palette, and you want to select, you need to select the layer of your action palette, as it were, that actually contains the action. Right now there's a drop down arrow. These are the things that we actually were doing in that. This is actually what makes up our action. So you can actually collapse these things and only just have this thing visible. So you just need to make sure you're selecting the top layer part of it, and then run the action by simply clicking on the go arrow as it was. And again, I get the solarized one because my action gets confused every time I change those radio buttons. But at any rate, you've got now essentially a black image. This is exactly where we want to start with. However, making sure that your top image is selected. You want to go back to the greens, back up to the greens, and then take this slider. Instead of saying you want to fill your greens with black ink, if you drag it all the way to the opposite, to the left, you're saying that you want to fill the greens with white ink. Now, I know that that's a tough concept, but that really is what is going on here. This is a negative amount of black ink, and if you were just to neutralize it out, if you were to bring this right here into the 0 mark, right here in the middle, so that this readout right here read 0, what you would be telling Photoshop is, as far as the greens go, don't add anything to them. Don't add any black ink to them. Don't add any white ink to them. And you can see you've got the green. The green is actually showing. But I'm trying to build contrast in this mask. So I actually do want to add white ink to that very same area. And it actually turns this into gray and sort of lightens it up. The problem I've got with this being lightened up like it is right now, though, is that I don't have a very good separation between these two. However, I can leverage the fact that I've got a hue saturation layer down here on the bottom. Because the truth of it is, if I turn this guy off, the way this selective color works is the colors that are in here, what it's really doing is looking at a pure green. And a pure green would be a 255G0R0 blue. That is not what this thing is. The green that I've actually got down in here, if you look on my readout scale, it's a 77 red, 140 green, and a 74 blue. That's not a pure green by any stretch of the imagination. in order to make it more green is why I've got this hue saturation layer on here. If you activate the hue saturation layer and then come up and use the targeting adjustment tool, it's this little hand up here that's got arrows pointing both left and right. If you click on this guy, you then come over, when you look at this at my hue saturation palette right now it's saying master. If I were to simply crank the saturation on master, everything is saturated. Her skin is saturated, the hair is saturated, and the green is saturated as well. I don't want to do that. I actually want to be much more specific about what gets saturated here. So I could use my drop-down menu and come down to greens, but again, like we saw in doing our black and white conversions, did we do that in this class, the tree? Oh, okay. Well, at any rate, the targeting adjustment tool is far more specific in picking up what this color really is. So in this case, again, it says master right now, but the minute you use the targeting adjustment tool, you should get an eyedropper if you have it. If you come over on this and you've got a brush or something else, you didn't click this tool. If you click this tool, you'll see it's supposed to look like a button that's been pushed, and that's why it's darker. At any rate, if you come here and you click, you'll see that it automatically takes you to the area, and it's right down here on the bottom of your screen. You can see the area that's actually been selected of this color. And now when you click and drag to the right, it saturates it. It increases the saturation. To the left, decreases the saturation. But in our case, what I'm going to do, again, I'm going to cancel this back out. I want to do this while I'm actually watching what's happening with my hue saturation, with a selective zero color on there. So I'm going to zoom in to look at the quality of this edge, because you cannot simply take this thing and run away with it. Sometimes you'll crank it all the way, sometimes not. So again, targeting adjustment tool, it knows that this green is underneath here. So I'm going to, again, I've got my hue saturation layer is the active one. I click and I start to drag to the left, and I see what it ends up doing to the side, to the edges of this girl's hair. Now, in my opinion, it's actually keeping the feathery part of this pretty well. It's not hitting this thing too hard. Again, I'm going to turn I'm just turning the eyeball on the hue saturation on and off just to sort of make sure that I'm not destroying the quality of this. I don't want to lose the edge quality of this. But I'm feeling pretty good about that one. That actually seems to have worked pretty well. I've got serious contamination down in here. I can deal with that in just a little bit, though. I'm going to double click on the hand to kick back out so I can take a look at it all. And for my money, this is actually the best move, the best start that we've had in this. This is, in my opinion, this was better than copying the green channel, and this is also better than doing the color range. So this is the move that I'm going to go after. However, I need to turn this thing into a selection. Right now I've got what I'm looking at over here. I've just got all these black and white things in my alpha channels. The reason I've got black and white here is that because doing what I've done with the selective color has removed all the color from this image. So what I end up with is left is RGBs, and they're all identical. The red is no different than the green, is no different than the blue, because I don't have any RGB left. All of these RGB values, they're identical. What happens if you have identical RGB values? What do you end up with? Gray. If your RGB values are all equal, they're all the same, you end up with gray. And that's why in this case, doesn't matter, the red channel is identical to the green, is identical to the blue, and that will always be the case if you're working with a black and white image. So there's two ways I can actually go about doing this. I could grab any one of these. I cannot grab the RGB guy. We'll try it. Just grab your RGB guy and try and make a copy of it, and you'll see that you can't do it. Let me scooch my channels up a little bit more. You'll see if you grab the RGB channel and you try to come down onto the little dog-eared guy, it does not work. It's because this, even though it appears grayscale, actually is RGB. You kind of have, it's not a true channel. The red one is, though, so you could actually just grab the red one down and do that, although I'm not going to suggest you do that. I'm going to throw the red one away. Instead, what I'm going to simply do is load the RGB as a selection. If you command-click on the RGB channel, it will load as a selection. And again, you need to remember how selections and loading selections work. The areas that are lighter have been loaded. They're much lighter. they're more active. The areas that are darker are less active. If I were to use this as a mask right now, I could use this as a mask right now. But right now, I've simply built the selection from those. However, I'm going to save this selection. So I'm going to come up to the select menu, down to Save Selection, and I'm going to type in the final one. And this would be 0 SEL knockout. And I'm going to say OK to that. Now, the trick to this is we've still got an active selection going. So if, for instance, you can still see this girl's eyeballs and stuff, if you were to try to paint this stuff out right now, you wouldn't be able to do it because this dark area is not selected. Again, by definition, active selected areas are these lighter areas. However, I want to work on the whole image, so I'm simply going to hit Command-D to deselect. Then I'm going to go after an overlay brush, the B key. I'm going to keep it at overlay. I'm going to keep it at that sort of 50% hardness. I'm going to hit the X key to get black to be my foreground color. And the first thing, actually, oh, that's interesting. So I'm painting here and I don't see any change at all. Does anybody have any idea why I'm not seeing any change? I'm on the hue saturation layer. That's exactly right. You need to click on the image layer to make it able to be working on the pixel part of this channel. And then again, you need to select the 0 selective color knockout that's at the bottom. And now I should be able to go in and with no problem hit this. Although I just made a mistake because I just painted right over this collar, which I did not want to do. So I'm actually going to get the collar first with black. So hit the X key to get black to be my foreground color. I'm simply going to paint in that little area of collar, and then I can go to the X key and not to worry so much about and sort of pick up the rest of this. I'm trying to avoid that edge of her cheek. As a matter of fact, I'm going to hit the X key and do a little black right along the edge of that to try to bring it in a little bit. I just know it's a problem area. And then again, I'm going to go back into this. Although, wait a second. We did this way too soon. Go up to your history palette. Let's go back in time before we did any of this. Undo all your brush work. I totally missed out. I totally spaced on a step. So I'm actually going to do the exact same thing that we've already done. I'm going to run levels on this guy because I can see up at the top I've got a lot of contamination. Levels is going to be an easier way to try to clean out this background that's behind the hair than trying to do this with an overlay brush. So I'll save the overlay brush to the very end. So again, if I look at my RGB readouts right now, I'm getting this weird thing. I'm getting these weird set of numbers. They're not showing me even black and white values at all. They're not showing me K. Again, it's because I've got the hue saturation layer is what has been selected. So if you select your background, you will then actually see your RGB readouts. And right now I've got my white point is at 193. Yours should be close. My black value is actually already at 0, so I don't need to worry about that yet. Command L to bring up the levels dialog box. Again, make sure, right now I'm not, you need to make sure that, I'm going to cancel out of this, you need to make sure that you're actually doing this to the 0 selective color knockout. So this channel is active, the background is active, Command L to bring up the levels dialog box and start to drag this back, simply watching my readout number 2. So I'm getting back to close to 253, go to my arrow keys. Inevitably, I go the wrong way. Just use the other arrow key. I ended up with an input value of 173. Before you say OK, use your preview on and off and ask yourself, is that being too aggressive about the hair? And I actually feel like it is. I feel like this is one of those cases where the hair is really, this feathery hair up here is beginning to fall apart. This edge is beginning to fall apart for me. So even though this is what it took to get me to white, I'm not going to use this. I'm going to start to back this off. So I'm going to crank this back down till I feel like I've got a little bit of the feathery hair part right here. So I ended up with, instead of 172, I ended up with a 181. You'll see that I'm not at pure white here. I'm at a 252 for that white point. That's okay. I can fix the rest of this with an overlay brush. Again, I'm going to come down here and see again what this is really doing to my edge. And I'm feeling like that's actually cleaning stuff up pretty well. I like that, so I'm going to go ahead and say OK to this. And then I will go after this with an overlay brush. Again, I'm going to do this. I'm going to start in the same place with the collar that's down at the bottom. So hit the B key to get your overlay brush, hit the X key to start with black, paint in just the part of her collar first. That's just when working on the pasteboard still helps. X key to get my white overlay brush. I'm going to go after the dark part of this side of her face first. I think it's easier to do that. So again, X key, and I'm just going to try to tighten that part up. And then the X key again to get to the white one to clean out the rest of that stuff that's around her. The other side over here. If you just start running your brush around here, looking at your RGB readouts, you'll see that those have gone to white. There's contamination right there. That actually might have been a little hair behind her, but it's annoying to me, so I just got rid of it. You'll never know. And then finally, I'm going to go up into this area where this guy is, where my point still is. I'm actually going to change this to a completely soft brush now. And I'm going to start close to these areas and just click and drag out. And click and drag out, and that's all I'm going to do over there. I'm going to leave this exactly where it is. I'm going to double click on the hand to click back out. You can see I have got contamination in this part. There's areas in here that were not, that my point right here, my number one point right here, actually did get that, that did go to black, so I didn't need to do a level adjustment there, but I can see that I've got contamination here. So I'm going to zoom into this. Again, I'm going to try to get this area right here using levels. I don't want to try to paint this out with an overlay brush because frankly, I don't trust it right here. So I'm looking in this area of contamination. It's the very top left part of her hair. I'm going to try to find an area in here that's got the worst part of it. Like I'm seeing there's an area right in here. I'm getting readouts in here that are, well, the biggest readout that I actually got right there was an 18. So I'm actually going to drop a point right there. Color sampler point is this one guy right here. So it ended up giving me, I think, a 16. We'll see. This is my number 3 color point right now. I'm going to change its readout to RGB. And it's in the 20s. So I'm simply going to run levels again. I'm not going to touch my highlight point right now. That's already been set. I was as aggressive about that as I could be. But I am going to change this guy right now to try to clean those areas up. And again, I'm getting up around 10, around 9, around 4. I'm going to go to my arrow keys. And then again, I'm going to use my preview button to check to see. I think that preview is, again, this is ruining that edge, this edge of this girl's hair over here. It's too aggressive. So I'm simply going to put it in the middle. I'm going to do it like a 10. I feel a little bit better about that. Again, use your preview on and off. Check the other side really quick. Make sure that we're not screwing too much up over there as well. Now I'm feeling pretty good about that, so I'm going to go ahead and say okay to that. And then finally, there's little bits that I need to clean up with my overlay brush that's in this area over here. So the B key, overlay, hit the X key to make sure black is actually my foreground color. My overlay brush a little bit bigger, and simply take care of all of that. Get rid of her eyes. And I think I'm pretty good over here. So again, up to the file menu down and save your work. Double click on the hand to kick back out. And now the layers that have actually done this work have done their job. We do not need these guys anymore, but I need to show you something about doing this selective zero color that can be a trap that you guys can fall into that I want you to avoid. So in our case right now, you can see that with the hue saturation layer underneath, it actually it made the green more saturated, and therefore when I did this zero selective color and actually said that I wanted to flood my greens with white, with white ink, because these greens were greener, it was more effective than without it. That makes sense to all of you, right? The trick to it is this, though. If you do this layer ordering in reverse, if you do this by mistake, this happens. I'm going to drag my hue saturation layer on top. You guys can do the same thing. And when you drag it on top, you'll see that no matter what you do, when you turn this guy on and off, it doesn't change anything at all. can anybody tell me why it doesn't work in this layer order? Wild guesses? That's exactly, great guess. That's exactly what's happened. The hues, the selective color layer has removed all the color from this image. It's now a black and white image. That's what the selective color did. It said every single color in there is going to be black except for green, and green is going to be white. There is no color left in this image anymore. So that when you use hue saturation on top of it, the hue saturation has nothing to work on. So it doesn't do anything. With the hue saturation underneath it, though, what it does is it's now looking at the color image that's on the bottom. It does the saturation move, and then this layer up here does the conversion. Does that make sense? So then these two guys have done their job. You can throw them both away. We don't need them any longer. I'm going to make 3 copies of my background layer. I'm going to then click on the very bottom of the background layers and put a blank layer in between it. So I've got my virgins going to be isolated from a new background. And in this new background, I'm going to fill it with white. Simply hit the D key to default your foreground colors and background colors to black and white. And then because white is my background color, Command Delete will fill this. Or you would think it would fill that. Huh. All right, interesting. I cannot fill this with white. What should I do? I know I'm in my RGB channels are selected. I've hit Command D. I know I don't have an active selection going. The layer is actually turned on. I don't think there's no lock on this, so I haven't locked the transparency. I haven't done any of that. It's 100%, blah, 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 blah. Okay, what? Yeah, I could try that. I could come up to Edit, down to Fill, and say to do it with white, which it does, but I'm still nervous about this thing not working, so I am going to undo that. I'm going to quit Photoshop. I am going to save this image. I'm going to launch Photoshop right back again. I'm going to come up to the File menu down to Recent and open this guy up again. Now I've still got that empty layer selected. And Command Delete, and it works with white. So clearly something unhappy in my computer. What can I say? I'm going to turn off the top 2 layers. I'm going to select the one that's just above my white layer and see how we did. I'm going to load the green copy knockout first. So again, Command click to simply load that as a selection. Back over to the green copy, and I'm actually going to apply a layer mask. It's inverted. It doesn't matter. Command I will get it the correct way. And I'm going to rename this as a green copy. Knockout, or knock. I'm going to select the second one now, the second of the changeable copies of the girl. I'm going to turn its eyeball on, and this is going to be my color range knockout. So I'm looking at color range over here. Command click to load that as a selection, and then simply apply that as a layer mask up here. I'm going to turn off the green, the guy that was underneath at the eyeball, so I can see what it looks like. And again, I'm going to invert it, and I'm going to double click on it, and I'm going to call this color range. And then finally, I'm going to turn that eyeball off. I'm going to turn the very top one on, its eyeball on, make it an active selection, and I'm going to see what my 0 selective color knockout looks like. I just loaded it as a selection. Back over here and add layer mask, and again, invert that. And so then this is what I really care about, is the quality of this edge of this hair right here. This is what I'm really looking at, is this guy. So with my 0 selective color, This actually looks like a really good edge to me. I'm going to turn that off and turn on my color range. My color range doesn't, in my opinion anyway, have anywhere near the finesse that the zero selective color did. Now, they all have spill, but this just doesn't seem to have the finesse of that edge that I was actually looking for. Finally, I'm going to turn it off and turn this last one on. And this last one actually seems like this is reasonably well done as well. However, the problem in trying to preview these things at the same time is that you've got to turn one off and then the other one on, and it gets to be really hard to see. It gets to be, in my opinion, really hard to do that fast enough to actually get some idea of which one's the better of the possibilities, right? So in order to get around that, I want you to do this. Come over to your history palette. Again, I'm not sure that this is well, we'll see if this is sticky or not. Over in your history palette, if you click on the little camera at the bottom to do a history state, now hang on one second, I'm going to cancel all of this. I want to make sure that you've got the very top one selected, the zero selective color. I want to make sure that that's the only one that's turned on and active. Then come over and click on the little camera icon, and you're going to actually name this history state zero select. Knock. And say OK. Then I'm going to turn this guy off. And again, I already know the color range is not going to be in the running, but I'm not certain about the green copy. So I'm going to turn the eyeball of the green copy one on, and I'm going to do another history state. I'm going to click on that, and I'm going to call this green copy knockout. And say OK. Did you guys get the little dialog box to open up when you did this? OK. That's not on by default. At any rate, then if you scroll to the very top of your history palette, you can actually see the two history states that you've made. And now when you click on one or the other, it will do it does all the turning off and all the turning on. So you can go back and forth really quick between the two. And I can see that in my green copy knockout, there's problems with the highlights that are right in here. And I also feel like my zero selective color did a better job of getting that feathery hair in the back. So which one would you guys go with? I'm going with the zero selective color one. That's the one I'm going to use. Okay, really quickly, we are going to finish touching this guy up a little bit just to make sure that we've actually got some stuff that we can work with. So I've got spill on here, but I've also got to fix this mask first. Now, this is just the order that I would suggest that you guys do this in. We could go in and remove the spill right now and then clean up the rest of the mask. That seems to me to be counterproductive. And for my money, I would clean the mask up first. That's actually how I would go about it. And then whatever spill remains, we can actually fix the spill. So in looking around this image, the only thing that I'm really struggling with are the edges of her cheek on this side and the edge of her cheek on this other side over here. Those are the two things that I am having a problem with. So again, we're going to fix this. We're going to actually choke this side of this girl's face right here. So again, even though I've got a history state that's saying zero selective knockout right here, I'm going to come down. I'm going to keep that history state. I'm going to throw the other history away, the one that had the green copy on. You don't need to keep history states if they're not going to help you out. So you can simply throw that guy away. I am then going to go to the bottom of my history palette. No, take that back. I'm not going to the bottom of the history palette. I am going right back. Here's the problem. If you click on this zero selective color history state, here, let me pull my history palette up here so you guys can actually see this. And let me change this so you can see the bigger. Okay, so when you select a history state, everything that has happened into history up to this point, you lose. Now, I'm not losing the channels. They're all still there, but you can see that where I was at the end of all of this, when I started making those history snapshots, it looked like this. When I make a new snapshot of here, we'll just try this as number one right here. When I click on that, I lose all of these history states. And if I were to do something else like right now, like simply turn this eyeball on, or actually I'm gonna throw the layer away, you'll see that it all of a sudden all of your history goes away. That's probably not what you actually want to do. I am going to go back in history, back in time, if it'll actually let me go back in time. It's actually not going to let me go back in time, which is all right. It doesn't really matter. I just wanted to show you that that's one of the things that you need to be aware of it when you actually select on those history states, something to be careful about. I'm going to throw that away too because it doesn't have any meaning to me. And we can just start from scratch here. Everything I want to do, I'm going to start from scratch here. So what I'm going to suggest that you guys do is we are going to start, again, click the very top layer. This is the one we want to work on. Click the mask itself to actually have it as what we are going to work on. And we want to pre-choke. We want to do a history state that's a pre-choke. So click on the little camera icon and type in pre-choke. And say OK to that. And I've got my history pre-choke state now. I am going to go ahead and actually choke this edge right now. To do it, you make sure that your mask is selected. Come up to the filter menu, down to blur, down to Gaussian blur. And we need to put a certain amount of blur on here. Mine came in with a 4 pixels, and that actually seems probably about right. When you actually do this, it makes the problem worse before it makes it actually better. I'm going to go ahead and say OK to that. And what I've just done, if you take a look at my this edge right here, I'll show you what I just did. By blurring that, I introduced grays into this. So you can see, especially if I zoom in, this is a much tighter version. This was before the blur. This was after the blur. So I've introduced these levels of gray. Now when I run levels on that, Command L, I can shift those tonal values by saying I want these things that are mid-grays right now to be darker, which is actually a choke in this case, or I can say I want to make them lighter, which would actually be a spread in this case. I'm going to cancel out of this so that I can actually watch this happen on my image itself. I'm going to back it out just a little bit. So again, with the mask itself selected, with the blurry soft edge, again, Command L to bring up the levels dialog box. I'm grabbing my dark slider on this guy, and I'm dragging this in to actually choke this in. Now you can see I've gotten all the way up here to like a 214 something. I've really had to crank this thing up to get that edge to completely go away. It's possible that we put in too much softening on that edge. It's possible we didn't put in enough, that it's too, that we, one way or the other. In my case, I feel somewhat okay about this. This seems to be an okay edge for me. I'm not too concerned about it. If you feel like it's still a little too soft and you want to sharpen it up a little bit, you would grab the white slider and start to pull it back in. And you can see, again, you're building contrast on that mask edge. However, I don't think that's what you should do. I think it should have that little bit of softness to it. However, you can also see that this has completely destroyed this girl's hair. If you take a look at what's going on here, this is actually what's happening here. This has destroyed this girl's hair. It doesn't matter. I'm just doing this in order to generate history states that I can paint with. So I'm going to go ahead and say OK to this. And then I'm going to add another snapshot over here in history. I'm going to click on that, and I'm going to call this post choke. And say OK to that. Now, in my case, I've got, if you look at my history palette, I've got a history version of what this image looked like before it got choked. That's right here. This is what it looks like after it was choked. I've got both of those going on right here. I'm actually going to select the pre-choke version of this, which takes me back to the beginning. Now, nothing has happened in here at all. I do have my mask actually selected. I'm simply going to click on the little box that's to the left of the post-choke phase. I don't want to select this history state because you'll see I ruined the hair again. But if you select the pre one before you've done anything and you simply click on this little box right to the left of it, that is saying that when you use the history brush, it will paint with what the image looked like in this post-choke state. So I'm simply going to use the history brush to paint this edge of this girl's face. So again, the history brush is right above right below the clone stamp tool. This is the history brush. You make sure you have the history brush, not the art history brush. Again, I'm going to check in my drop-down menu. I'm going to go ahead and keep this as a soft brush. I am going to keep my blending mode as normal, 100% opacity, 100% fill, and then you can be pretty blunt about this. You can simply come in and paint out that line, and I'm going to take it all the way down. I'm not going to use it on this side. If I try it on this side, you can see what it does on this side. It sort of helps things out on this side, but it still doesn't really completely fix the issue that we've actually got going on over here. So this happened to us last week when I was actually showing you guys another version of using this history brush, and so I want to show you what that looks like. If we were to copy this file right now, so I'm going to simply create a new background copy of this guy. I'm just going to, you don't need to do this, just watch up my screen. I'm going to drag this down to create a new version of it. You will see now when I use this post-choke history brush, I'm not allowed to use it. And the reason I cannot use it on this file right here is this layer did not exist when I made this history state. Now the one underneath it does exist. So I can use the history brush on that. But if you create something after you have built a history brush or a history state that you want to use, if it didn't exist when you did that state, you can't use the brush on it. Does that make sense? All right, so I'm going to throw this away because I don't need it. This is what that edge looks like. If you actually hold down, you guys can all do this now, please. Hold down the Option key and click on the mask. You'll actually see what this edge looks like. You'll also spot the other contamination that I never fixed that's actually back in here. So we could do that right now. So I'm going to go ahead and do that right now. I've got my mask is actually selected. I'm going to hit the B key to get an overlay brush. I'm going to make it a little bit smaller. It is at overlay, 100% opacity, 100% flow. I'm going to dock my history back with my actions again. Hit the D key to get my foreground and background colors to default. Hit the X key to go back to this. And I'm going to clean up this area of the background. It is clearly contamination. But what I was going to also show you is this edge of her face right here. We can use the overlay brush on her face while we're actually watching what it does to the image itself. So I'm going to select the image, and I'm looking right here at that edge. I do have my mask is now selected, not the pixel part, but the mask. With an overlay brush, this image part right in here is white, meaning that I want to paint with white in this area right in here. So I need to hit the X key to get to white. And then again, working on this mask with an overlay brush, I can come down here, and it actually sharpened up that edge. I've still got spill in here, but it sharpened up that edge. I can hit Command Z to undo that, and I maybe want to go the other route. I maybe want to actually add to my mask to get rid of this edge altogether. So I'm going to see what that looks like. Hit the X key to get black, because now I'm actually going to be adding to the black area of my mask, and do the same thing again, and you'll see it removes more of that from her face. Possibly a better way of going about it. However, in the end, I'm feeling like it's just too lumpy here. And the reason this is too lumpy is probably because it was out of focus. And when it was shot, this was out of focus. And so when it got translated into this mask, you simply get this lumpy edge. So how would you guys fix this lumpy edge? Exactly. So the pen tool, the P key. And I'm going to start here on her ear. And again, in this little loop right here, make sure that that is made as a curve. And now I'm going to cheat. I'm going to stay on the inside of her skin. Again, we are going to mask it out so that you're never going to know. You don't want to be drawing the line right against her skin because that line is already lumpy. We already know that's the problem we're trying to actually fix. So I'm actually going to create an artificial cheek line for her. Now I feel like the line on her neck is not okay. So I'm going to keep running right down on her neck. And as soon as I get out here, I'm going to go around and complete this up here to the top. And again, this is now, I'm going to go into my path palette. I'm going to double click on the work path, and I'm going to call this left cheek. and say OK. I'm going to load this as a selection. Command click loads it as a selection. I'm going to feather it. I'm going to come up to the select menu, down to modify, down to feather. You guys see it's the same steps keep happening over and over and over and over and over again, which is how you want this to be. Now, in my case, I don't want to just fill this. If you hold it down the Option key again and you look at what's going on, what I'm really going to do is fill most of this with black. However, this part of her ear right up here where I started my path, it's okay. I don't want to fix this if I don't have to. I'm only going to work on this part of her face right here. So I know I need to paint that with black. However, I want to watch this in real time. I want to see how this works. But I've got a problem, and the problem that I've got right now is I see the marching ants. So even if I go in here with a brush and try to paint this out, the marching ants are hiding the edge that I need to be able to see. So to get rid, not to get rid of them, but to hide the marching ants, you hold down the Command key and hit H, and they temporarily go away. They're still there. If you hit Command H, they come right back. If you guys hit Command H and it asks, do you want to hide Photoshop or hide extras? You want to pick extras, not hide the program itself. Now when I go to a B key, the brush key, again, I know I need to be painting with black because I'm trying to extend this part of my mask to hide that part of her face. So now I'm using my brush. I can avoid the ear right now. I don't need to be worrying about painting on her face because my selection is restricting that. So for instance, if I come over here and paint on her skin over here, nothing happens because the selection is restricting this. But now I can come in here and I can actually paint this line out. And that is painting it on my pixel layer, which I don't want to do. Command Z to undo that. Make sure that you're working on the mask layer to do this. And then again, click and take this part out, and it will actually get rid of that part for you. I still have an overlay brush going on here, which is a mistake. Command Z to undo that. Go back to a normal blending mode for your brush, and now you should get that completely cleaned up, sharp edge. Yeah. So you got your path is selected, but this path is selecting the skin. I need the path to be selecting this part. You know what I mean? Okay, so you can try inverting the selection, but you're going to have to be careful. Select the menu, do an inverse on it. Now everything else is selected, so just be careful when you do the line down here. This part of your skin will be protected. Okay, so back to the palette. Make sure that you are on that mask. You are. You are in overlay. You can change that up. Good. With a brush. And now you need black as your foreground color because again you're extending your mask to hide this. So black is your foreground color. And again the selection is doing it, so you just need to get the whole thing. So again, maybe a little aggressive on your path next time, not quite so deep into that. You know what I mean? You're just looking to fix the part that's broken. So did this work for everybody? Did this not work for anybody? We good on this? Okay. Personally, I still feel like this is too sharp. I feel like that edge part is actually too sharp. So if you agree with me, you can go back in your history to where you actually did your feathering. So we've actually got a selection going. You can't see it because you've still got Command H. In this feathering, I've gone one step back. So I've undone the feathering that I did on this selection, and I'm simply going to come up again to the select menu down to modify, and I'm going to put in a feather of 2 pixels and say OK. And then I'm going to try the exact same thing again. I'm going to hide that edge first. And this seems to me to be a much better edge on that. It seems more plausible. It's matching the sort of softness that's around her ear as well. So it just seems like a more plausible edge to me. And I'm feeling pretty good about that. I'm going to double click on the hand and things are feeling pretty good about it. The only thing I've still got left in this to fix is going to be the spill. And it'll be the final things that we actually go after. I'm going to save this work, Command S. And then finally, to fix the spill, you go into the pixel layer itself. Now, we are going to destroy this pixel layer, but that's OK because we've still got the virgin copy sitting down as our original background copy layer down here. So I'm going to select the pixel layer to actually do some work on it. I'm going to hit the B key again to bring up a brush. I'm going to make sure that this is a completely soft brush. I'm going to change the blending mode from normal down to color. I'm going to make it a larger brush. Again, I'm using the bracket keys just to the right of the P key. I'm going to zoom into this area of her hair up here at the top. I'm going to sample, actually, I'm going to go back to my pasteboard because I was not on my pasteboard here. So, because I want to be able to fix these areas of hair that are up here. And the trick to it is, I don't need, without the pasteboard, I would have to actually be starting in this area and painting out. I don't want to do that. This hair that's in here is the correct color. I don't want to change that at all. You don't want to, the only thing you want to change is the spill. You don't want to change. So you need to be really careful about whether you use this brush or you end up, you'll be able to, it'll change all of the color of her hair to one single color, which will be a clear fake in that. I'm actually going to make my brush a little bit smaller to get rid of these little guys right here at the top first. If you hold down the Option key, you get the temporary color sampler tool, and you can sample an area of the color that's near the spill that you want to remove. 100% opacity, 100% flow, and I'm actually going to take that out, and I don't see it go out. Why is this not going away? Why is my spill not leaving? This happens all the time to me, and it's now happening to you. I'm actually also going to go to my tablet to do this kind of work. Anybody, does anybody have a clue why my spill brush is not working? If you hit Command H, you'll know why. I've still got an active selection going, and it's the one that's right down at the bottom. It's the one thing that you need to be careful about when you start hiding your selections is they don't go away. They're still selected, but because that is selected, I can't do anything work that I do will only happen in this area because that's an active selection. Command D will do a deselection, and now when I go up to the hair up here with my brush, on this pixel layer, it will actually take that color out. And again, I'm going to do the same thing over here. I'm going to sample a new color. So when I do the remove spill work, guys, I just keep one hand on my Option key. I'm sampling a new color there. I'm going to make my brush a little bit larger and take care of the spill there. I'm going to sample another color down here to take care of that down there. I'm going to sample another color here. And you can see that by sampling new colors over and over and over again, you don't actually get, it doesn't actually end up being one monotonous color. However, let's say, for instance, that you did this by mistake. Well, let's see. Let's say that you did this. Let's see if I can find. Yeah, try that out. Let's say that you ended up doing that, and you're like, okay, I just removed all the color out of that, and that's not right. That's not correct. You can sample another color and paint right back over it. It will, whatever color you've got, will overpaint the old one. Let's also say that you've got, for instance, I feel like this area down in here is a little too red. When I use this one over it, the color that I've got right now, I feel like it's a little too green. So I'm going to hit Command Z to undo that. You can simply drop the opacity of your brush, and now when I'm painting with that green color, I'm getting a mix of the original red that was there with the new green that I'm replacing it with. I'm creating a brand new color of hair. Does that make sense? When you get near this girl's ear, you're going to get into trouble because if you use that soft brush, what ends up happening is, actually let me do that with my opacity dragged all the way back up. What ends up happening is that you end up painting, you can see that part of her ear just took on the color of hair. So I'm going to hit Command Z to undo that. Instead, at this point, you need to go to a hard brush because you need to be able to use the edge around this girl's ear. So I'm going to make my brush a little bit smaller, and then I'm going to simply change the color of the stuff that's right around her without hitting her ear at all. Double click on the hand to kick back out and do the color on this side. Again, still the B key, still working on that pixel layer. Command click to get another color in here. Command click again. You need to think about how this color actually would look. Like this area right in here would actually be this darker lack of color, but the color that's out here on the edges probably has a little more tone to it. So I'm going to actually pick, and you'll also see if you hold down your Option key and you click and you move it around, what this is showing you, this is actually called a heads-up display. The bottom half of this circle is actually the color that is currently picked. The top half is going to be the new color. So as you start to move around, you'll see that you can actually pick different colors by doing that. And I feel like that's a better one for this color down in here. You're always working from the outside in, never from the inside out. So for instance, I've got a color picked right now. I don't want to paint over this because that color right there was never wrong. So again, it's out, in. Make sure that that's still a hard brush. It is. I should have gone to a softer brush for the work up by the side of her head, but I'm not going back. Finally, I've got spill right here on her shirt, so I'm going to sample this color right here for her shirt and take care of that. And you'll see I used the very same thing. I hit her neck. That would be a mistake. Not following my own advice of working out in. And I'm going to make it a softer brush right now. I've got a little bit of spill right underneath her ear, so I'm going to sample that and take care of that guy. You may even pick up a small amount of spill. Look at this highlight that's right on the side of her face. This guy right here is an indication that there's wrap that's coming around. It's just in this highlight right here. If you sample her cheek color right here and then try to paint this in, a lot of times that makes it too strong. You can see it almost looks like I put makeup on her right there. That would be a mistake. Command Z to undo that. Instead, you'd really crank your opacity down. I'm going to crank mine down to like it's somewhere in the 30s, and then I'm strictly going to stay in that area of that highlight. And that actually seems like a pretty good correction to me. I've still got a problem on this side over here of spill, so I need to crank my opacity all the way back up, make sure that it's back to a hard brush to deal with this area right here. And now I do have to come from the outside in, or I'm going to recolor this girl's hair that's actually out there. So I'm simply going to come into this edge right here and take care of that. And I'm done. If you feel like there's still a little bit of spill on this girl's neck in here, we can go after that. And again, I would go back to a soft brush to do that and a much larger one. And then sort of work this. I already have skin tone sampled. And take that part out. Again, if you feel like underneath her neck you've still got some of that green glow, I would still drop my opacity down and paint some of that out to sort of restore that. Double click on the hand, save your work, and turn that in for your homework, and you'll have 100. I know, right? I would still argue, look at the quality of the work that you guys are doing. You should all be incredibly proud of what you're doing. Oh, but you should look at this as well. If you hold down the Shift key and click on the mask, you'll see what I mean about destroying this pixel layer. That's what's actually left. All of that brown, all the whatever, you've clearly, yeah, right? You've clearly screwed this guy up, but you've got the virgin down here, so you don't need to worry about it. Again, simply click on that X again to get rid of it. Okay, are there questions about this? All right, we're going to start something else really quick. We'll get through about a half hour of it, guys, and then we will, we're doing retouching today. I know, right? About time, right? It's only week 7, and we're already talking about that. All right. I want to show you one last thing really quickly. It was from last week. If you need to get to the stoplights in order to close this up, you hit the F key twice. If you look in that folder where we were before, again, from week 6 last week, not week 7 right now, you'll see another file in there. It's called 902 copy. I want you to double click that to actually load it to bring it open. We are going to run that 0 selective color action again really quickly on this one. So again, to your actions palette. Did everybody find that file? So back in week 6, it's 902 copy. All right, so back into Photoshop. back into the actions palette, and I need you to find that 0 selective color action for me. I've only got like 300 of them myself. Yes. Yes. Right. These computers reset every night. Okay, but this is actually interesting. You can save actions. But here's the trick. So if you find your 0 selective color action and you simply click on it to make it active, and you come to your dropout menu right here, you will actually, if you look at this, you will actually see that you cannot save actions, that this is not available to you. It's grayed out. This is a long-standing bug that's existed in Photoshop. I don't know why they don't fix this. I can't imagine it's this hard to fix, but they don't. The trick to this is that they will not let you save a single one action. They will let you save, though, a group of actions. So if you look up in your action palette, when you guys made yours, I'm going to click on my new action again. When you click on that new action, you'll see that it's going to, you can name it, but this set that it's got right here, if you've created other sets, you can create your own sets. By default, you guys probably, the only one you probably have is default actions. Is that the only one you guys have? So, say what? Yeah, so that's so the action that we would be building right now is going to be put in whatever set that you actually have picked here. Now, the default actions are the ones that Photoshop pre-makes for you, and they're always there. However, I'm going to cancel out of this really quick. You can create a new set for yourself. To create a new set, it's here in the Actions palette. You simply click on this thing called Set. A thing will open up, and you can give it your name with actions, or you can name it anything you want. You'll see on my computer, I've got retouching actions. I've got actions that are named after me, blah, 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 blah. So let's just name it something so that you know it's yours. I'm going to call mine Versers 2 actions. And say okay to that. Then I'm going to bring my action palette up a little bit so I can open it up and get it a little bit bigger so you can actually see what's going on. And you can see right down here, these are my different sets of actions. The ones up here, these are my default ones up here. You can click on this to collapse your default actions. This is Versers actions right here, which is a couple of resizing things for my wife's website. That's what's in there. There's retouching actions that are right here. So again, if you simply select that 0 selective color action, and you go up to your menu, you cannot save that. However, if you drag this into the 0 selective color action folder, this is now inside that set that was called 02. Now when you click on the set, you can come up and save that action. These actions can be saved out. If you just click on this, you can put them anywhere. You can save them to your desktop, and it would just be called Versers Actions 2. If you then click on Save, it will actually put them out there. So again, it's ridiculous. I've got a set that's only got one action in it. Why I can't just save the action, don't ask me, but that's the way Photoshop works. In order to use this again on a different machine, you would come to the same flyout menu, and you would come down to Load Actions. And then you would simply navigate to, again, where you just saved whatever file that you just saved. In my case, it was on my desktop, and it was called Verser 2 Actions right here. I would click on this and open it. Mine's already open, so I don't need to do that. Okay, so that's how you would save it. So Rebecca, you could actually just, anything you do, save it, keep it. You can load up, let's say that you save an action on this computer, and then a different one on that computer, and a different one on this one, and another one on your laptop. Then you would simply, at some point on one machine, load all of them, put them all into one set, and then you could export that set so that it doesn't, so you're not having to do having separate, sets all along. But at any rate, I want to run this action again on this guy. So I want you to go ahead and run 0 active selective color on this image by simply clicking on it and then hitting the go button. Somehow it's in your action, something got built, and it's this guy right here. It's this hide color range guy. So go ahead and just say continue. You can actually click this and drag just that part of it to the trash. And now this should, but it worked anyway, but yeah. Okay, so you've got this guy I actually set like that. I'm going to go ahead and leave 0 selective color on reds. And I'm actually going to then again flood my reds. I'm going to simply drag my reds to with white ink to do this. If I need this to be a little bit stronger, I can actually click on the hue saturation part. I can click on my targeting adjustment tool. I remember that whatever this thing is in her pocket was actually red. I can click on that and drag it to pump up the reds a little bit or to suppress the reds a little bit. In my case, I'm going to just zero this out. I'm not going to change hue saturation yet. We actually may do that a little bit later. I want to load this as a selection to actually get it to work, to operate for me. How do I turn this thing now into a selection, into an alpha channel that I can actually use? Yep, command click on the RGB channel. This loads it as a selection. Now, you don't see any marching ants. That's because there's nothing in here that's been selected more than 50%. Either that or I'm going to hit Command D to make sure I don't have a selection going. And then I'm going to load this guy again. I'm also going to hit Command H to make sure, yeah, I don't have anything that's actually being hidden here. So then I'm going to come up to the Select menu, down to Save Selection, and I'm simply going to call this Reds. Command D to deselect. I've now actually got my reds are right down here. I'm going to actually load my hue saturation layer. These guys, I'm not going to throw them away, but I'm going to turn them off right now because I don't want to see them right now. I'm going to load this reds as a selection, the thing that's down at the bottom. Command click loads it as the selection. And then I'm going to come over and put an adjustment layer on here, and I'm going to put a hue saturation layer on this guy. It's now put a hue saturation layer on here with this layer mask. This is called a luminosity mask. I will show you. We'll start all over again. So did you get the reds channel saved? Okay, so all we did was we had hue saturation on here. I mean, hue saturation and selective color. I took the red channel of my selective color. I drug it all the way back to flood my reds with white. You can see there's little areas of red paint up here that have actually showed up. Her hair doesn't have any red in it. That's why there's no. That's why this is completely black. The skirt's got no red in it. That's why it's completely black as well. To load this as a selection, I command click on the RGB guy. It loads it as a selection. I come up to the select menu and I come down to save selection. In my case, I'm going to call this reds 2 because I've already done this once. And say OK. Now I've got reds 2 sitting right down here. I'm going to load reds 2 as a selection. I'm just hovering over it. I'm going to actually select everybody up at the top, the RGB guy at the top. I'm turning off selective color and I'm turning off hue and saturation. I'm then going to scroll to the bottom of my channels palette and I'm not going to select the red channel. I'm just hovering over its icon, holding down the command key and clicking on it. That has now loaded it as a selection. Again, you don't see any marching ants because not 50%. The marching ants show up when you have greater than a 50% selection of this, which I don't have here. But it is still an active selection. I then am going to come back to my adjustment layers and add a hue saturation layer on top of it. And you should get a hue saturation layer that's got that reds mask on it. Again, if you hold on the Option key and click on the mask, you can see what it is. Did that work for you guys? Okay. That's correct. We want the reds to be white and everybody else all the way black. This is the mask we want now. So command click on RGB. loaded as a selection up to the select menu. Again, update selection. Okay. Good. Okay. Go back on here to RGB. Turn these two guys off. We're going to load this as a selection. So don't pick it exactly. Yeah, make sure it covers it. Also add a hue saturation. And you'll see in your hue saturation layer that the mask is actually been built in. So here's the advantage, guys. This is the reason we went to all this trouble. This is called a luminosity mask. This is actually based on the luminosity of what we actually ask it to do. And you can see here areas that are right around her, on her eyelids, around her eyes. This little color right here. These are all areas where if I make a change on this, these are going to be affected greater here than, say, for instance, her hair, because this is how a mask works. Again, the lighter areas of the mask, actually, the change shows up. The darker areas of the mask, you don't see it anywhere near as much. So back here with this, the properties of this actually selected, I can actually now, you can do one or the other. The mask is actually controlling it pretty well. However, you could pick the targeting adjustment tool to actually pick exactly what red this is. And you could click on this version, this little part of that red paint right now, and you could simply drag its saturation completely out, and you'll actually see that that thing completely, it saturates down. Now, that's a very specific targeting adjustment. If you've done that, hit Command-Z to undo that. Instead, you could simply leave the master control selected and drop the saturation, because the mask itself is controlling where this happens and where it doesn't happen. So for instance, now, if you actually turn this eyeball on and off, you'll see that all it's really done is gone after the reds. It's actually desaturated the reds. However, it hasn't completely desaturated the reds. And the reason it hasn't completely desaturated the reds is because the areas where the mask is allowing this to happen is not pure white. Does that make sense? So if I want the effect to be stronger, can I change this mask in such a way that that desaturation of the reds is more intense? How? I could actually go after that. You're absolutely right. So I could have bumped up this effect in there. But let's say I didn't do that. Let's say this is just what I'm faced with. Exactly. I can run levels on this thing. So watch my screen. Don't do this yet. Just watch my screen. I've got just the mask itself selected. If I hit Command-L to bring up the levels dialog box, I can actually make things darker, which is going to ruin the, take the effect away. Or I can start to open my mask up like this, and you'll see what's actually happening now. So I'm not going to do it while we're doing this. I'm actually going to do it when we're watching the whole image, so you guys can do this with me. So again, make sure that your mask is selected. Command-L to bring up the levels dialog box, and start to pull your white point back, and you'll actually see the paint that is along the side go completely out. The paint that's actually around there. So I've just sucked out all the red color. If you've done this, do not hit OK yet. Just use the preview to come on and off, and you'll see that not only am I taking the red out of the paint that's on whatever these things are, I'm also taking it out of her eyes as well. Let's say that I really didn't want that to happen. I'm going to hit cancel out of this. I really just want it to happen around this paint stuff. Could I do that? How would I do that? What would I select? Okay, well, we've already got this selection is already made. It's sitting right here in the mask. I'm going to hold down the Option key to show you the mask again. Is there a way I can make this white whiter and nothing else? How? That was just but I don't know how. Yeah. We've been doing this all along, guys. The B key to get to a brush. Change your brush to overlay. Again. Everybody thinks there's so much more in this, and there really isn't. I am going to make this a soft brush. Actually, I'm going to make it a medium hard brush, or just somewhere right in the middle. 100% opacity, 100% flow, and then I can simply paint, with white as my foreground color, and this actually lightens up. And to see the effect of that, we'll go back into here. I'll just hit Command Z. That's the effect of actually doing it right there. So you can actually go in and specifically just target these areas like this. Make sense? Okie dokie. So why don't we do a quick break now? I've got 2:45. Let's really be back at it by 3, and we will get into retouching.